final item of business today is members' business debate on motion 18943 in the name of Emma Harper on Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now. And I call on Emma Harper to open the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to bring forward this debate on Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week. As Deputy Convener of the Health and Sport Committee, I'd like to start by thanking everyone from across the Chamber who has added their support to my motion. I'm a wee bit disappointed, though, that nobody from the Conservative benches has supported my motion, but I will gently remind them there is still time. I also thank the organisations and individuals who have provided the briefings ahead of the debate. The briefings really do help to guide us as decision makers and give us an insight into what is going well and what can be changed. I greatly enjoyed Sport Scotland's briefing. Their vision is an active Scotland where everyone benefits from sport. They recognise that more needs to be done to achieve gender equality in sport, but there is a lot of great work being delivered throughout the sporting system to support progress. The theme of this year's week is Leaders Behind the Leaders. Behind every woman in sport is at least one leader. It is these leaders in sport who impact their wisdom, their technical expertise, their confidence and their skills, and other women in sport who then go on to lead and to shape and strengthen our world-class sporting system in Scotland. Inspiring women leaders like Judy Murray, who not only helped shape her sons into world champions, but is now spending much of her time helping develop the next generation of female coaches, players and volunteers. The Scottish Government's Women and Girls in Sport Advisory Group is full of very accomplished and inspiring women leaders. It was established to provide independent advice on female participation and awareness raising in all areas of sport and physical activity. The board makes sure we are driving participation, marketing and awareness of Scottish women and girls in sport, and that every woman and girl in Scotland is given the best opportunity to participate in sport and physical activity. The board is made up of a gid wheen a bra inspiring women, and I want to take a moment to give each of them a wee quick shout out. Chair Amanda Jones has been practising employment law for more than 20 years and has a particular interest in discrimination and sports law. Gemma Lumsden is an athlete who plays wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby. She sits on both the Scottish Disability Sport and Basketball Scotland Young People's panels. Claire Nelson is the CEO of Netball Scotland. Claire is on a mission to change the landscape of women's sport, recently launching the Changing the Game campaign to challenge the many disparities that currently face women and girls in Scotland. Vivian McLaren is the chair of Scottish Women's Football and an award-winning marketing and communications strategist. Maggie Cunningham is chair of MG Alba, the Gaelic Media Service, or Gaelic Media Service. Maggie has worked in a number of senior positions in the BBC. Hala Usta is Diversity and Inclusion Manager for the Scottish Football Association. Hala is an established campaigner for equality, diversity and inclusion within sports. Emma Mann is a young ambassador and also acts as an active schools vice-captain. Kirsty Ewan volunteers for Scottish Swimming as the Domestic Open Waters Events Coordinator. Sheila Begbie, MBE, is the Director of Domestic Rugby and is keen supporting all aspects of the development of rugby. And look how good our women's team are doing right now also. Dee Bradbury is President of the Scottish Rugby Union and Scottish Rugby Representative to Rugby Europe. Yvonne Greaves is a National Women in Business Manager and responsible for designing and implementing the Women in Business strategy, both internally and externally across the UK. One more is Maureen McGonigal. She's the founder and CEO of Scottish Women in Sport. Its vision is for Scotland where females of all ages, abilities, ethnicities and walks of life are participating in sport or physical activity. These women are just some of the leaders behind the leaders in Sport Scotland, and we need to celebrate them all. We Ken leaders in sport are crucial role models who motivate, promote and inspire others to participate in sport and physical activity. Presiding Officer, in 2019, Scotland hosted 6 European and international sporting events, kicking off with the UEFA Women's Under-19 European Championship and culminated in the biggest event in women's golf, the 2019 Solheim Cup. I must also mention sporting in my South Scotland region, which this year saw the IIHF, the Women's World Ice Hockey Championships, taking place in Dumfries at the outstanding Dumfries Ice Bowl. I attended a few of the matches and the atmosphere was absolutely electric. We had the Scottish Women's Volleyball Championships and the Scottish Club Swimming Tournaments both at the Citadel Leisure Centre in Ayr. And the World Championship Coastal Rowing Skiffy Worlds was held in Stranraer and Loch Ryan in July, with a record entry of 693 crews from 57 clubs worldwide, including women's teams as well as other teams, and they came from as far away as the United States, Canada, New Zealand and Tasmania. The whole week was a fantastic event to promote water sports, and for me, I know that Loch Ryan can be a complete launching pad for water sports in the future. In closing, Presiding Officer, we know women and girls are more likely to play sport if there is more coverage of female athletes in the media. Our Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Advisory Board found 95% of media coverage is dedicated to men's sport, and that increased levels of coverage of women's sport do have a positive impact on physical activity. I fully support the Board's call for a media summit to review existing coverage of female sport, and I look forward to hearing the Minister and other members about what must be done to further encourage women into sport, not just for this week as Women and Girls in Sport Week, but for the future as well. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Move to the open debate. Brian Whittle, followed by Angela Constance.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I thank Emma Harper for bringing this debate to the Chamber? I am always very happy to talk about sport, and can I assure her that I did sign her motion. I have a vested interest here. I have 3 daughters, of which I coached the eldest two to international sport. And now my youngest, I have the pleasure of now coaching her as well. And she has reached the heady heights of under-13 Lanarkshire javelin bronze medalist. But I'm having great fun coaching her. And I was also, in passing, just also reiterate the work that Maureen McGonagall's doing to further women's sport. What I was going to say is, I've said this name before in the Chamber. Mariwika Puika is a name I've mentioned in this Chamber before. Why is that important? She won the 3,000 metres in the 1984 Olympic Games. Why is that important? That's the very famous race where Zola Budd and Mary Decker Slaney had their infamous clash. And the reason I mention that is because that was the longest race that women could run on the track at an Olympic Games. Spin that forward to 1988, and I had the real pleasure of sitting in the stadium and watching Liz McColgan take a silver medal in the 10,000 metres. And I was in the stadium in 1991 when she ran probably one of the greatest distance races I've ever seen, in demolishing a world-class field in 90-degree heat at the World Championships. And now we have a full complement matching the men in the Olympics. So women's sport has come an awful long way from those days. We mentioned the way that women's rugby has come on, women's football, women's cricket, women's golf, and they're starting, I think, to make some inroads into the media coverage, and there's an awful lot more to be done in that respect. So I think there's a lot in my lifetime. There's a lot happened. But one of the things I was going to talk about controversially is I think an issue that is for the further development of women's sport that is fast coming down the track, if you'll pardon the pun. And that is the difficult and complex issue of transsexual athletes, specifically biological males self-identifying as females and competing against biological females. This is a sex versus gender discussion currently being played out in a court in the US of A. And the outcome of that case will have a profound consequence on women's sport. I think what worries me most in this is there's women, sportswomen like Dame Kelly Holmes and Sharon Davis and Paula Radcliffe have been attacked and vilified for raising this issue. To be clear, what we're talking about here is an attack on women for speaking up on women's rights issue. And just for context, since 2017, two biological males in collegiate sport have won 15 women's track championship titles previously held by females against biological female track athletes, and women will really struggle to get to match those performances. And there's now a biological male competing as a female powerlifter, and after going 11 months of hormone replacement therapy set multiple world records in a women's category. But for me, the real danger here, I will take an intervention. Yeah.
Alison Johnson.
Yeah, would Mr Whittle acknowledge that sports governing bodies are well placed to adjudicate when it comes to such matters, that there is work ongoing on this issue, and that, of course, everyone has a right to take part in sport, and that all would wish that it was an enjoyable, welcoming experience?
Brian Whittle.
I agree with a lot of what you say there, and I'm going to come on to that. Where I disagree is I think that governing bodies are not well placed to deal with this, and they haven't dealt with these issues particularly well at all. I'm not offering an opinion here. What I'm telling you is what's happening in world sport. I think the biggest issue for me, the real danger, what I've talked about there is individual sport. I think the biggest issue comes when it comes into contact sport. It's where there's a real danger, and it's already evident in what's happening.
Could you come to a close, please, Mr Whittle?
Okay. I think what I would hope is that the issue of these athletes will be treated with more compassion and respect than other athletes such as Caster Semenya and similar intersex athletes have received so far. I think equality of access and opportunity, irrespective of background or personal circumstance, should be the goal. So let's make sure that the subject is properly tackled and, more importantly, treat everybody with the compassion and respect that they deserve. Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Just a gentle reminder to people that we should always be sticking to the relevance of the motion. I know sometimes it's quite a difficult line to walk, but please always bear it in mind in members' debates in particular. Call Angela Constance, followed by Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Like Brian Whittle, I suppose I also have a vested interest in this debate tonight, not because I have a daughter, because I have a boy, an 11-year-old, and it is equally important for him to be exposed and to see all the great things that women achieve in sport. And it is encouraging that, while at the age of 11, he's not known for his feminism as yet, but without the bat of an eye, he will happily watch and enjoy going to see women's football and women's rugby and other such sports. I want to express my appreciation to my colleague Emma Harper for securing this debate during Scottish Women and Girls in Sports Week, as it provides me with the perfect opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of some of the sportswomen who hail from my constituency in Amond Valley and West Lothian. And I have no doubts that many of you will be well aware of the achievements of the inspirational Shelley Kerr, MBE, who's the manager of Scotland's women's football team. And like me, Shelley was a pupil of West Calder High School, but while I was skipping PE because I didn't want to wear shorts, Shelley was starting her football career whilst at school, at a time that actually it was very difficult to find a junior team for girls. Now, Shelley has a long list of achievements, but what I want to highlight is that Shelley returned to football as a mother after a break of 9 years, and fought very hard to win her place back in the Scotland team. And she holds the national record for being the oldest player in a national team to play international football for Scotland at the grand old age of 39. This, of course, is in addition to her sporting prowess, which speaks volumes, I think, about the role model that Shelley is to women and girls of all ages. Another local legend is Elise Christie, who was originally a figure skater before specialising in short track speed skating in her teens. She is a 10 times European gold medalist and was a world champion in Rotterdam in 2017. And Elise has been very open about her own mental health issues, and she uses her social media platform to very good effect in helping to destigmatise mental health. And the relationship between good physical health and mental health is, of course, well known. And how could I forget or fail to mention the greatest dancer, 14-year-old Ellie Ferguson, on winning the TV show Competition. Ellie gave half her winnings to the Edinburgh Dance Academy, who helped her achieve her dream, and she's a very special young woman indeed. There are, of course, so many young West Lothian women I could mention, but that would not be possible in the time available. But I couldn't participate in this debate tonight without mentioning a young woman who distills a lot of pride in West Lothian, and that's Christina McSherry from Stonyburn. Christina is a Special Olympian and British powerlifting champion who now plays bowls. And I have a very special attachment to the weightlifters, as my dad was part of a very successful weightlifting club in Stonyburn in the 1980s and 90s. And I was always very proud that this essentially working class men's club did support Special Olympians, and they even at that time had the odd woman training alongside with them. And although all of the West Lothian women I have mentioned tonight all participate in different sports and different physical activities, the one thing that they all have in common is that they started young. And yes, some of them changed sport and some had a career break and returned to their sporting passion. But this to me demonstrates the importance of the right opportunities for physical activity within and out with schools for young people, because we know the benefits are lifelong. Presiding Officer, I know the facts speak for themselves that there is much more to be done to increase the participation of women and girls in sport. Gender equality is important in all walks of life, but the good thing is we know what the issues are and we're all determined to address them.
Monica Lennon, followed by Willie Coffey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm also pleased to have the opportunity to speak in this debate tonight on Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week, and I thank Emma Harper for bringing this motion to the Chamber. Sport brings so much benefit and enjoyment to all of us, and as Scottish Labour spokesperson for health and sport, it's nice to have the opportunity to take part to celebrate the amazing achievements of women and girls participating in sport in Scotland. It has been another phenomenal year for women in sport, as we've already heard, and with Scotland's women taking part in high-profile events like the Women's World Cup in football, we have a lot to be proud of. I think we all know the benefits of keeping active, not just for the physical health benefits, but also the mental health benefits it can bring, often playing a huge role in reducing stress and anxiety. So I'm pleased we can take the opportunity to celebrate women and girls in sport during this week and to recognise the individual achievements, but also to recognise where there are barriers still in place to women's full participation and to address what can be done to remove these barriers. And as my colleague Brian Whittle raised the issue, I would just want to gently say to the Chamber that trans women are women and non-binary people exist, and I think there perhaps is a debate ongoing on wider issues, but for tonight I want everyone to feel included and valued when we talk about the achievements of women and girls in sport. I was struck when reading the Girl Guiding Report from last year, which finds that girls' participation in sport tends to drop off quite dramatically around the age of 13, and I have a daughter of exactly that age. Between ages of 7 and 11, over 40% of girls said they played sport or exercise every day, but that drops to just 21% between the ages of 12 and 17 years old. So even despite all the progress we think we've made towards women and men's equality, that in itself is quite a telling statistic to me and something we need to get better at addressing, because sport is for everyone, or should be for everyone at every age, and more girls and young women need encouragement to keep up with the sport that they've taken part in primary school and through their secondary school years. The report from the Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Advisory Board this week was also a disappointing read despite all the progress. It's sad that women are still so underrepresented in sports media coverage. And even more troubling, that the content of online news outlets on women's sporting achievements could be interpreted as over-sexualised. It's not rocket science that a major factor in participation in anything, whether it be sport or politics, is the lack or otherwise of role models. If young girls don't see themselves reflected in national media coverage of sports, it's no wonder that we see that all too familiar cliff edge drop-off in participation as they reach their teenage years. And talking of barriers to women in sport, I want to take the opportunity to pay credit to the phenomenal On the Ball campaign, which has become such an important mechanism for ensuring female fans of football are heard. So a shout out to Erin and Orla and Michaela, who should be proud of what they've achieved. We have over 100 clubs who have now pledged or who are actually period positive and provide free period products in their football grounds. So that is certainly something to celebrate. I've talked about younger women and girls. If I can just briefly shout out to Age Scotland, who are promoting sport to tackle loneliness and isolation. And through working with Netball Scotland, they have established over 30 walking netball groups across Scotland. And there are massive health benefits for that. So I look forward to the Scottish Government taking forward the summit recommended by the Advisory Board in their report published this week, and to continue to work with all MSPs across the Chamber to ensure that we're doing all we can to remove barriers to women in sport.
I now have Rhoda Mackay, followed by Alison Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I apologise at first for having to leave after my speech tonight. I'm very pleased to speak in this debate and thank my colleague Emma Harper for bringing it to the Chamber. This debate is timely as, aside from being Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week, I think we're seeing a sea change in attitude towards women and girls participating in sport. As we've heard, the Solheim Cup, women's football, the Netball World Cup have dominated the sports headlines this year and are gathering new fans by the millions. Presiding Officer, I think that levelling the playing field for women and girls begins in school. So I'm heartened to learn that my granddaughters are being encouraged to take part in any sport they fancy and nothing is off limits. Change days from when I was at school, where sport was almost optional for girls. I played netball, which I loved, but that was the extent of it. And now a new report says women and girls will be more likely to take up sport or exercise if there is increased reporting of top athletes and events in the media. Positive role models to which girls aspire is a key motivator, in the same way that boys have been inspired by footballers since time immemorial. In Scotland, they have plenty of role models to choose from, and Emma read out a very impressive list. But they also have Laura Muir, Eve Muirhead, Julie Fleeting, Carly Booth, and that's just a fraction of the top sporting women in Scotland. Age Scotland tells us of the benefits of exercise for the more mature, lowering blood pressure and heart rate, weight loss, and not to mention the huge benefits to mental health. I myself discovered the joys of walking during summer recess, discovering our fantastic canal pathways, and I now know how true walking your way to better health is. And now an expert group is advising a summit to increase media coverage of women in sport and encourage girls to be more active, has been recommended in a report. The group, which is made up of leaders in sport, business and the media, has recommended a Scottish Sport Media Summit set up to review and challenge the nature and extent of existing media coverage in Scotland, which Emma Harper outlined. Having worked in newspapers in a previous life and knowing how much male-dominated sport dominates the media, this would be a very welcome move, in my opinion. The report also highlights the need for greater gender balance in leadership and management roles across Scotland. Active Schools, a Sports Scotland initiative in conjunction with local authorities, provides young people with quality opportunities to take part in sport and physical activity before school, during lunchtime and after school. And their independent research found 92% of girls and young women at school say that taking part in sport and physical activity makes them feel happy or very happy. And that figure is just as high as the figure for male respondents. This positivity to sport and physical activity is reflected in the latest Active Schools female participation figures for 2018-19, which shows a massive rise in participation. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, the future is bright for women and girls in sport. We know we can excel in any sport. and I look forward to watching us take on the world competitively, sweeping the medals board and reaping the benefits of focusing on sport-based leisure. Thank you.
Alison Johnson, followed by Willie Coffey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'd like to draw members' attention to my entry in the Register of Members' Interests. And I'd like to begin by thanking Emma Harper for allowing us to celebrate women and girls in sport and to insist that we see more of them and that we learn more of their many achievements. I think this is a topic that we've discussed several times in the Chamber, and it seems that many of the barriers we've addressed before still remain in too many cases. It's really important that we encourage everyone to take part in sport, but there seems, we know for a fact that there's still a divide here. We know that women and girls are less likely in many cases to be involved. Their participation isn't at the same levels in many sports as their male counterparts. There are, of course, exceptions to that rule. I spent Saturday morning at the Scottish Athletics AGM in Glasgow, and it was noted that participation levels in some age groups of girls is actually higher than that of boys. And I think it's always been a sport that's been particularly well balanced in that regard. It's always presented, you see as many women taking part as you do male athletes, and I think that's a great strength of it. And also when we look at when the Health and Sport Committee undertook an inquiry into the barriers to physical activity and sport, we met with many women in communities across Scotland, and we heard from them their concerns about cost often, but time was a huge issue. If you're juggling childcare and work and so on, sometimes it's just too much at the end of the day to get out and do that class. So there's something to be said for the need to build opportunities in during the day, whether that's a lunchtime sports activity. I know there's small steps in that regard in this building, and some of us do it on an informal basis, but I think that could be more formalised and built into the way we do things. I think in Sweden in particular, the numbers of people who are members of clubs is truly phenomenal. It's something we need to look at, and just that community cohesion is, it's well worth investing in. I'd like to just mention the success of Jog Scotland when it comes to encouraging women and girls to participate. The membership is 81% female, and there's a huge membership there. It's 40 years plus. I think that is notable, and it says, I think it tells you that when these opportunities are available in your community, when they're affordable and accessible, they're really warmly welcomed. It's no surprise there too. They've had that, great focus on the positive impacts on mental health that being physically active can bring. I too, I can't thank Maureen McGonagall's Scottish Women in Sport group enough. It is heartening that we've had the Women's World Cup this year. I think coverage has been boosted exponentially. The Solheim Cup has done the same for golf. But, the point has been made by members in this chamber. The coverage of women's sport and physical activity is, I actually think it's a national disgrace. I sit on the bus most mornings if I'm not on my bike, and I'm looking through the papers, and I've said this in the chamber before, I make a point of going to the back pages to see if I can find a woman doing sport. Now, some days I cannot find one, or if I do, they're there because they're someone's other half. So who is writing for these papers? Who is commissioning this work? Why are editors not saying, I absolutely insist that we look to represent all of those who are taking part in sport in Scotland? Because when we have world, a superstar, someone like Laura Muir, but we still have this patchy disregard for women's sports, achievements. It really is time that we started debating this more seriously. I realise that I'm running out of time, but I just would like to, to thank all of those who are making strides in this regard. I think the work that Shelley Kerr has done is notable. We've had Judy Murray in Parliament recently too. We need more of this, Presiding Officer. Thank you.
Well, due to my having been quite lax in speaking times, I am minded to accept a motion without notice under Rule 814(3) to extend the debate by up to 30 minutes because I still have 2 open debate speakers to go. I now invite Emma Harper to move a motion without notice.
Moved, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. The question is that the debate be extended by up to 30 minutes. Are we all agreed? That is therefore agreed, and I call Liz Smith to be followed by Kenneth Gibson. Oh, I missed Willie Coffey. How could I do that? Terribly sorry. We have 3 speakers still to go. Willie Coffey to be followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thank you very much. And congratulations to my colleague Emma Harper in bringing the debate to the Chamber. We've got some incredible female sporting legends to be proud of in my part of Ayrshire. Rona Martin in curling and Rose Riley in football, to name but 2. And in our modern era, we now have award-winning and inspiring acrogymnastic coaches, Gemma Thompson and Tracy Wilson. And we have Destiny Robertson, who is a current Scottish and British boxing champion. But I want to share a few words about a local hero and personal friend of mine, Rose Riley from Stewarton. Rose featured in a recent documentary about her life and illustrated the many obstacles she had to overcome to achieve her stunning success as a footballer. She was kicking a ball from a very early age and frequently got into trouble at primary school for playing football with the boys. While at St Joseph's Academy, her coach and mentor John Roy recognised her talent and coaxed her to cut her hair very short so she could sneak into the team as Ross Riley. She was so good that Celtic tried to sign her before realising she was a lassie. Now, for many years, Presiding Officer, the SFA had actually banned women from playing football. Basically, from 1921, women were banned from playing the beautiful game. That ban was made formal in 1949 and lasted till 1974, when they were forced to lift the ban. Not exactly an age of enlightenment for our national body, was it? So at school, Rose trained with the boys and played in unofficial, unrecognised women's football matches and competitions. When she was 17, Rose scored for Scotland in a match with England. But she had to wait a ridiculous 47 years to get her cap from the SFA, receiving it only this year from the First Minister, along with some of the other women from that time, Margaret Macaulay, Linda Kidd, Jean Stewart and Jane Leggett. It was soon after that match, though, that changed Rose's life forever. She and her friend Edna Neelis get the chance of a football trial in France with Stade de Reims, then on to a glittering career with AC Milan. It's a story of one of Scotland's greatest ever footballers. Played 10 games for Scotland despite being banned by the SFA for daring to challenge their medieval leadership, and went on to play 24 times for Italy, but always made sure she had a saltire under her Italian top, and she won the official World Cup in Italy in 1984 in front of 90,000 fans. She won 8 league titles, 4 cups and the Golden Boot for most goals in one season. A Scotland legend indeed, and recognised in her Hall of Fame at Hampden. Now, Rose had to fight for her right to play football, and that's why she is such a role model and an inspiration, not just to female footballers, but to all athletes. Her role as a trailblazer is now widely recognised. She also gives back to the footballing community as an ambassador of Walking Football Scotland, and she will be rightly honoured soon in her hometown of Stewarton. Presiding Officer, in the modern era, our talented athlete support programme in East Ayrshire has gone from strength to strength since its introduction in 2009, nurturing and supporting athletes to achieve their dreams, with some 47% of those being women. The Sports Council too has played its part, funding and supporting young athletes across East Ayrshire and spurring them on to a bright future. For women like Rose Riley and the many talented female athletes then, participation and success in sport was a battle, simply because they were women, and that shouldn't have been the case. Righting the wrongs of a short-sighted and gender-biased football association was ultimately overcome by Rose at considerable cost to her and her family, but she has always remained patriotic and first to shout out for Scotland. So once again, I congratulate Emma Harper for bringing this subject to the attention of Parliament, and look forward to hearing the other members' speeches and the response from the Minister. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back on track. Liz Smith to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I warmly congratulate Emma Harper for tabling this motion, and can I offer my own contribution to this debate as somebody who has 40 years, dare I say, of experience coaching girls' sport, but also as co-convener along with Alison Johnson of the cross-party group on sport. And I think we owe a lot to our predecessor, convener Margot MacDonald, who did a lot to promote women in sport, and perhaps it's something that the cross-party group on sport can return to, so we'll have a conversation about what else we can do. Now, I think Women and Girls in Sport Week is an excellent opportunity, obviously, to highlight not just the importance of sport and physical activity and personal fitness, but also the life skills that sport, especially competitive sport, teaches us. Good quality, regular participation in sport are, in my view, very necessary for a strong, healthy and successful society. And I think everybody should have the right and the opportunity to take part in, compete and pursue their own sporting ambitions, whatever they might be. Sport offers a unique experience because the rules that govern it are usually those that adopt the principle of a level playing field. People can practice and decide on their own self-determination based on that ability, their will and their experience. And that can be anything from individual self-improvement to feats of accomplishment that only work with teamwork or elite performance. And I think we have to remember that some individuals, including for many girls, they feel that sometimes they can accomplish more together than they can apart. And that is where I think we have an issue to deal with. Our country has borne witness, obviously, to the invention and growth of many great sports, from golf to shinty, football, rugby, but not always on an equal basis. And I think Monica Lennon raised an important point about the work that we still have to do to ensure that that equality is provided. And I think it was also interesting to read in The Scotsman yesterday an article about the media coverage. Alison Johnson referred to this in her own speech. The media coverage, or lack of it in some cases, is a real worry. Although I do actually think that it's the newspaper coverage more than radio and TV that is falling short on this, because there has been a marked improvement in what is on television, Football World Cup obviously being one example. But I have to say that I thought the Solheim Cup was extremely well presented, not just because it was in Gleneagles in my own constituency area, but I attended that on 2 of the days of the Solheim Cup. I thought the coverage there, apart from the good golf, was really excellent, and I think that's perhaps something that we can take forward for the future, because it does matter. It matters from the perspective of the people who are competing themselves, but it obviously matters from the impression that it gives to the wider world what the media is saying about women in sport. So we need more of that. And again, perhaps it's something that we could debate a little bit more in this Parliament. Now, I think Brian Whittle was right to raise some of the difficult issues, whether it's expressing an opinion or not. I don't actually think that's the important point. I think there are difficult issues in sport for women as well as for men. And I think, again, it's a very sensitive issue, but I think we have to ensure that we are taking on board a lot of the concerns of people who are involved in that process. Now, many members have spoken about some of our sporting heroes, our female sporting heroes, and rightly so. Can I just add a little bit from personal interest for women's cricket, which I've been involved with for these 40 years. I think the women's cricket has come a very long way, not just because of the extraordinary efforts that Cricket Scotland have put into the extra coaching that they have provided, but who would have thought just a few years ago that Scotland would be actually hosting the World Cup qualifiers, which I had the pleasure of attending at Forfarshire Cricket Club just at the end of last month. So I think they've gone a long way, and particularly they had to fight barriers where it was seen very much as a gentleman's sport, rightly or wrongly. So they've come a long way on that, and I think they deserve great credit. But thank you to all the people across Scotland who get involved in women's sport, whether they are coaches, whether they are administrators, whether they are supporters. We need you. We need you badly, because women's sport will not function without the efforts that you put in. Thank you.
The last of the open debate contributors is Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate my colleague Emma Harper on securing today's debate to mark Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week. In June of this year, a report on sports participation in Scotland, Trends and Prospects, recorded that over a 5-year period between 2012 and 2017, the percentage of men meeting the physical activity for health guidelines was 71% compared to 60% for women. This report clearly illustrates that a gender gap in sports participation exists in Scotland. And this starts at a young age. Between 8 and 10, more girls participate in sport than boys, with a rate of 79% and 76% respectively. However, after the age of 10 and into their teenage years, female participation drops significantly. Accordingly, by the age of 13 to 15 years, fewer girls participate in sport than boys. The Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation state that barriers exist which prevent women and girls from participating in sports and physical activity, and these include practical barriers. Women tend to have less leisure time than men, as they take on a greater burden of responsibility for housework and caring responsibilities such as childcare or looking after elderly relatives. Female participation is also inhibited by a lack of access to facilities, as sports halls prioritise male participation. The Foundation also records that women and girls have a higher rate of body image dissatisfaction and suffer from a relative lack of self-confidence in relation to sports. As a result, many rate their performance or ability negatively. Women also have fewer female sporting role models, although today I was delighted to hear many excellent women in sport being named by colleagues from across the chamber who young women and girls can emulate. Thanks,
Keith Brown.
Can I thank Kenneth Gibson for taking the intervention? He's mentioned role models. It just gives me the opportunity to mention Chelsea Raymond, who's in Stirling University at my constituency, who recently got an award from the SFA for girls and women's football. She both takes the Stirling University team and also takes teams of girls within the Stirling area. So that kind of role model, as well as those that we see in the TV screens, is really important for young women and young girls.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you for that, and I'm particularly pleased, given our connection to my alma mater, Stirling University. Scottish Women and Girls in Sports Week encourages more women into sport and physical activity, raises awareness of those regularly taking part at all levels, and specifically addresses the barriers that lead to lower activity rates among women. This week, the Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Advisory Board published its 2019 report, Levelling the Playing Field. It focuses on this year's theme of Leaders Behind the Leaders, designed to develop a legacy of confident, knowledgeable and experienced people who throughout their life in sport and physical activity will help build and strengthen the world-class sporting system for everyone in Scotland. The report also notes the importance of female role models who motivate, promote and inspire others to participate in sports and physical activity in schools, local sports clubs and in the local community. Scotland has a proud history of female sports participation. We heard from Willie Coffey about Rose Riley, and in football, participation of women can be traced to 21st of August 1628, when the Reverend John Lindsay, Minister for Carstairs, noted in the local cult records of Lanark Presbytery registers that both men and women had engaged in insolent behaviour by playing football on the Sabbath. The first women's international football match took place at Easter Road, Edinburgh, on the 7th of May 1881 between Scotland and England, with around 1,000 spectators. The Glasgow Herald described the Scottish team as looking smart in blue jerseys, white knickerbockers, red belts and high-heeled boots. The match concluded with a well-deserved 3-0 victory for Scotland. During the First World War, as women replaced men in munitions factories, women began playing football in their breaks to improve their general fitness for work in heavy manual labour. From this, several munitionette teams competed against each other across Scotland. The first such match was in August 1917 at Celtic Park, Glasgow. Unfortunately, despite the rapid growth and success of women's football, the Football Association withdrew all support from women's football in 1921, and the Scottish Football Association formally banned women from competing in 1949. And it wasn't until 1974 that the SFA lifted the ban and formally recognised female participation at last. Presiding Officer, those of us who watched the Women's World Cup in France were, like so often happens with the men, elimination was snatched from the jaws of qualification. We're impressed by our team. However, despite recent progress, much more could be done, and Scottish Women and Girls in Sports Week provides the essential platform for that aspiration.
I now call Joe Fitzpatrick to respond to the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I want to add my thanks to Emma Harper for securing this afternoon's debate and the contributions from across the chamber. As Alison Johnson, I think, mentioned that the Health and Sport Committee did some work in this area a number of years ago. So this is something the Parliament has been working on for some time, and there's been general consensus. It's also worth noting that, Presiding Officer, you yourself, I think, chaired the Young Women Lead Committee report, which looked at leadership programme for young women and looked at themes such as socio-economic status, how sport and physical activity is provided in schools, and the societal pressures and external influences. So I think it is important that while we're coming to this is an area that this Parliament has been working on for some time. When I was appointed Minister for Public Health, Sport and Wellbeing, I said that I would do everything I could to continue to improve opportunities for women and girls in sport and physical activity in Scotland, and that's the commitment that I take very seriously, and it's what this government has tried to do. We've taken a range of measures to challenge gender stereotypes, to help women's voices to be heard and to increase opportunities. I think Willie Coffey's contribution just reminds us just how far we have come. I was pleased to have been at Hampden earlier this year to witness some of the women that Willie talked about receiving their caps, as they should have received many years ago. But I think it really does show just how far we've come. So as we celebrate Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Week, we acknowledge that we continue to see a gender gap in the participation rates for sport and physical activity. The stubbornness of the gap shows that we need to find new ways to retain women and girls in sport and to support more inactive women and girls to become more physically active. With that in mind, during last year's Women and Girls in Sport Week, I announced £300,000 funding to support the development of new projects and partnerships. And I'm pleased to be able to report to Parliament that 9 sports governing bodies have successfully used this funding to lead partnership projects. Whether boxing or basketball, squash or triathlon, I'm hopeful that these projects will not only get more women and girls active for the periods of the project, but will provide them with learning that can be applied both within and beyond these sports to increase female participation and close the sports gender gap. As part of this week, as ministers, we try and visit as many opportunities to see women and girls involved in sports across the country, and I think there's 14 ministers involved in those visits this year. I was very pleased that one of my visits was last night to East Kilmarnock Gymnastic Club, where I saw some fantastic enthusiasm, both in terms of the leadership of the women and girls who are coaching and training, but also in terms of the participants. There's a clear determination within that club to look at how they can tackle the drop-off that we've heard Monica Lennon and others talking about at that early teen year. And it does look like East Kilmarnock Gymnastics Club are going some way to tackle that particular drop-off. So I know there's good practice out there that we can learn from. And just to say, if anyone gets the chance to visit the gymnastics club, then there is some real talent. There's some of the members of that club are going to Mexico later this year to display some absolutely amazing gymnastics, so watch out for them. But we know there's much more needs to be done to eradicate the inequalities that many women and girls still face in participating in sport and physical activity, which I think Kenneth Gibson in particular raised some of those points. So that's why the government took the decision to establish the Scottish Women and Girls in Sport Advisory Board, and I want to particularly thank Emma Harper for outlining the breadth and strength of leadership on that board. I was delighted earlier this week to receive their report levelling the playing field. It's the results of a lot of hard work, and in my view it's a bold report with huge ambition, and I warmly welcome it and all of the recommendations to government. The recommendations are not only bold but also challenging, and that's exactly what I hoped that they would be. When I went to my first meeting of the advisory board, we talked about them being experts within their fields and about the importance of not simply being content to tinker around the edges, but being prepared to be bold and to challenge and to really push the envelope. And I'm delighted that that is what they have done with their first report. The Scottish Government will now take some time to consider all of the recommendations carefully and will publish a full and considered response in due course. But I'm sure you would expect me to give you some of my initial thoughts on their key recommendations tonight. So one of the things I found very encouraging is that all of the recommendations not only align with their own 4 key focus areas: intervention, prevention, reconnection and continuation, but more impressively with the work of the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. So these recommendations complement that work and will help us advance and accelerate it towards a more gender equal Scottish society. It also builds on the momentum from this year, where we saw recent high-profile sporting events mentioned by Rona Mackay, such as the FIFA Women's World Cup, the Solheim Cup, and the Vitality Network World Cup being watched, enjoyed and experienced by huge audiences. The increased visibility not only shone a light on the inspirational role models outlined by Kenneth Gibson, but we've also seen participation across a number of these sports spiking. Angela Constance, I think, made a very strong point about how such visibility can have a wider impact in shaping perceptions across society. and not just in relation to girls. There's much to be proud of in the report, which contains a set of strong recommendations to continue to grow and improve participation and audiences. So one of the major proposals is to create and deliver a Scottish Sports Media Summit, and I was pleased to hear cross-party support for this. I look forward to working with Gender Media Equal Scotland to help us achieve that. Working together with the media, I want to see real commitment to improve gender balance and increase the visibility of women's sport, athletes and social participants through improved content and increased coverage across all media platforms. Alison Johnson shouldn't have to search for female athletes in her newspaper or on TV. They should be receiving equal coverage. And I think Liz Smith made a very strong point about why it is not only in society's interest, but it's in the media's interest to do that. And the Solheim Cup, she's absolutely right. It was the perfect stage for Scotland, of course, but it was also good golf, and it was good coverage. And my goodness, what a thrilling end. And it's obviously fantastic that we won. And that always helped. But even if we'd lost by that one goal, it was absolutely thrilling. And I, like Liz Smith, managed to spend some time there and hear the enthusiasm of the audience, which got bigger and bigger as the week went on. I started with attending the start of the Junior Solheim Cup earlier in the week, and crowds were better than expected, and it just continued to get better as the week went on and as that thrilling end. So the idea that women's sport is just not something you'd want to watch, I think has been totally thrown out, and the media, whether it's TV or the written or radio media, need to realise that it's in their interest to give women's sport the coverage that they deserve. So by accepting the board's recommendations, we'll work towards that levelling of that playing field where everyone is treated fairly and can achieve their full potentials. I want to take this opportunity to thank the advisory board once again for their work, the input and the boldness that they have produced in this report and their recommendations. You have my personal commitment to take this forward, these recommendations, in a positive spirit, and to work together to make sure that we do deliver the kind of change that we want to see, and ultimately that they help us to improve the lives of women and girls across Scotland. And in the progress of doing that, helping us to create a truly equal society. Thank you.
That concludes the debate, and this meeting is closed.